I'm Jason Farman. I am a professor of American Studies and Immersive Media Design at the University of Maryland in College Park, where I'm also Associate Dean of the Graduate School. And today I'm going to walk you through my talk, which is called Timewise Design, a theory of durable futures that invite repair, reinvention, and cultural value. This talk is drawn from my current book project, The Novelty Engine, which will be published by the University of Chicago Press next year. I first grasped the staggering scale of waste that we produce in our craving economy through Chris Jordan's installation at the Seattle Art Museum that I saw in 2009. 426,000 mobile phones sprawled across a vast canvas, representing the number of discarded mobile phones every single day in the United States alone, many of them still working but tossed aside for newer models. This stark visual represented the core issue with modern consumer culture. It produces an ecological disaster that is massive yet also mostly invisible. When I first encountered this image, it raised a thought experiment for me that I haven't been able to let go since. What would a mobile phone or a smartphone designed to last 30 years actually look like? This is a picture of the iPhone 3G, which was my first smartphone. And so this is a thought experiment. What would a mobile phone, especially a smartphone, that was meant to last 30 years look like? And I'm not interested in conceiving of a phone that's designed to be recycled responsibly after 2 or 3 years, nor a phone that's designed to be traded in for a discount on the next model, but a device that's intentionally designed to live alongside a person across decades, changing with them, aging with them, being repaired, upgraded, and reconfigured over time. Timewise design isn't an answer, but a provocation. What changes if we design objects as if they must accompany us across decades? This question feels especially urgent when we consider that the majority of smartphones today are replaced between 18 and 24 months, even though many of these devices are still technically functional. As the director of the London Design Museum, Diane Sujic, has put it, we live in a world drowning in objects, and increasingly, we aren't drowning because objects fail too quickly, but because they fail to remain meaningful. In my conversations with neuroscientist Kent Berridge, he offered a helpful distinction here that we are more, he offers a distinction between wanting and liking. He notes that we are creatures who are more adept at wanting things than we are at liking things. Wanting is driven by anticipation, novelty, and desire. Liking is rooted in satisfaction, attachment, and use. Contemporary consumer culture has become extraordinarily good at stimulating wanting while systematically undermining the conditions that allow liking to deepen over time. And today, I want to argue that addressing disposability in design needs to be more than designing with better materials or more efficient recycling system. It requires a fundamental shift in how objects are made intelligible to users, how they invite engagement, repair, adaptation, and cultural recognition over time. And to do this, I introduce a framework that I call Timewise Design. I'll elaborate on this framework and then ground it in 2 case studies: Dieter Rams' Vitsu 606 Universal Shelving System, first designed in 1960, and the framework laptop, launched in 2021. These objects operate in very different domains, furniture and computing, but they converge around the shared logic of durability, legibility, and long-term cultural value. So what is Timewise Design? Timewise Design is a theory of intentional planned durability, but crucially, durability here is understood simultaneously as material, emotional, and temporal. It prioritizes continuity, evolvability, and embodied connection. It emerges out of resonance between design solutions, cultural values, and systemic shifts. In this vein, I define Timewise Design as having a few key features. First, it centers on intentionally planned durability. Drawing on Jonathan Chapman's work on emotionally durable design, Timewise Design understands that objects endure not simply because they resist physical failure, but because they remain emotionally and culturally viable across time. Chapman reminds us that designing a product with stronger materials alone risks producing what he calls durable waste, objects that technically work but are discarded because they no longer resonate with who we are or how we live. Second, Timewise design reframes durability as a relationship between past, present, and future. In contemporary technological culture, the past often signals obsolescence. Older devices are marked as incompatible, outdated, or unsupported. Timewise design reverses this logic. It treats the past as a bridge rather than a marker of obsolescence, as a meaningful connection that enables continuity into the future. This approach foregrounds backward compatibility, repairability, and updatability as core design values. It asks, can an object remain legible across decades? How can it invite users back into its interior over time rather than sealing itself off? What policies enable repair? What business models thrive in cultures that value the durable? And third, Timewise design is fundamentally adaptive. It anticipates that tastes change, technologies evolve, cultural imperatives shifts, and spatial contexts transform. This is where Timewise design diverges from many sustainability frameworks that implicitly aim to suppress the desire for novelty. Instead of trying to wean people off of novelty, Timewise design recognizes novelty as a deeply human evolutionary impulse. Desire is entangled with our need for continuity of identity, our attempts to overcome boredom, and our desire to situate ourselves meaningfully in a changing world. Timewise design thus builds in moments of novelty within long-lasting objects, opportunities for reconfiguration, customization, repair, and creative reinvention. In this way, it allows objects to signify both stability and change, to signal continuity while still marking participation in contemporary life. At its core, Timewise design proposes a framework of intelligibility for objects that are accessible in their construction, repairable over time, adaptable to evolving needs, and culturally legible as objects of value. When I first began thinking about durability as a cultural practice, I assumed the resistance to such durability was obvious, that corporations want us to upgrade, period. Planned obsolescence is profitable, end of story. But it's not that simple. If Timewise design were merely a matter of better intentions or smarter objects, we would already be living in a world full of 30-year smartphones. The obstacles are deeper and more uncomfortable than bad design alone. For decades, we have been trained to link progress and innovation with upgrades and replacement. Innovation has meant erasure. Each iteration wipes away the previous one. To hold onto an object past its cultural expiration date is a small act of defiance, or worse, a failure to keep up. We have internalized the upgrade cycle logic. The resistance to planned durability in Timewise design is both technological obsolescence and psychological obsolescence, to use Vance Packer's terms from his book, The Wastemakers. Packer cites industrial designer George Nelson. Design is an attempt to make a contribution through change. When no contribution is made or can be made, the only process available for giving the illusion of change is styling. In a society so totally committed to change as our own, the illusion must be provided for the customers if the reality is not available. A century of product design has embedded this logic into the very fabric of our consumer mindset. We've smoothed interfaces, we've sealed enclosures, we hid screws, we've translated complexity into surface usability. Timewise design asks us to reverse some of that translation. I also ask, who exactly has the time to repair? Who has the disposable income to invest in a device built for 30 years? If durability becomes a boutique aesthetic, an heirloom smartphone for the well-resourced, then Timewise design risks becoming a moral performance rather than a structural shift. It's easy to romanticize the effectiveness of repair cafes and modular laptops, but harder to reconcile that romance with platform capitalism, proprietary ecosystems, and software obsolescence that made my 2008 iPhone absolutely useless today. And perhaps the deepest resistance lies here. We have grown accustomed to the frictionless convenience. Effort feels inefficient, and learning feels optional. Expertise feels exclusionary. When repair is framed as labor rather than ritual, as inconvenience rather than agency, most people will understandably choose replacement rather than repair. Timewise design asks us to complicate our definition of progress. It asks whether speed is the only metric that matters. It asks whether novelty must always mean new hardware rather than renewed capacity. We have inherited a system optimized for turnover, aesthetic minimalism, and sealed surfaces. Timewise design challenges each of these logics at once. That's why it feels ambitious. That's why it feels difficult. And to me, that difficulty might actually be the whole point of Timewise design. Lastly, this brings me to a central challenge: networked obsolescence. Today's technologies are no longer self-contained. They rely on sprawling infrastructures of servers, software updates, and proprietary ecosystems that lay far beyond the user's reach. Nearly 100,000 apps were delisted from the App Store in the first quarter of 2024 alone, many because companies folded or abandoned their software. In such conditions, physical durability isn't enough. The device can be perfectly intact, but functionally dead. Timewise design must therefore extend beyond objects to address systems, standards, and infrastructures. It asks not only how things are built, but how long their networks are maintained and for whom. And this raises a urgent question of equity. Who is the most vulnerable when repair is impossible? Who bears the cost when support disappears? Timewise design insists that durability is a social issue, not just a technological one. So far, I've spent a significant time talking about what would make Timewise design not work, but what are some examples of it working? I want to point first to my first case study here, which is the Vitsu 606 Universal Shelving System. Designed by Dieter Rams in 1960 for British furniture maker Vitsu, the 606 Universal Shelving System is a canonical example of Timewise design. Rams' broader design philosophy is well known through his 10 principles of good design, which evolved over a decade. Among these principles are two especially relevant ones here. The first is good design is long-lasting, which is number 7 here. And good design is environmentally friendly, number 9. And then finally, Rams famously summarizes ethos as less is better, linking with his final design principle: good design is as little design as possible. Embedded in these principles is a cultural critique of excess and disposability. The 606 system embodies this philosophy through a deceptively simple modular architecture. It consists of thin aluminum E-tracks mounted to the wall, folded metal shelves, and connecting pins. The system uses the building itself as its structural frame, resulting in remarkable material efficiency. What makes the 606 system a paradigmatic example of Timewise design is not only its longevity for over 60 years of continuous production, but its backward compatibility. A shelf produced in 1960 can seamlessly be integrated with components manufactured today. This is a design commitment to continuity across time. Because its components are typically made from single materials like aluminum or steel, they are robust, they're easy to repair, fully recyclable. But equally important is this system's intelligibility. Its structure is visible. Its logic is legible. Users understand how it works and how it can change. The system adapts as lives change. Shelves become desks, desks become storage, storage becomes display. The same components follow users through different homes, careers, and family structures. Rather than demanding attention, the system recedes into use. And this is how the 606 system has garnered cultural value. Its prestige lies not in novelty or branding, but in restraint, transparency, and trust across time. It signals a relationship to objects grounded in stewardship rather than replacement. My second case study is the framework laptop. If the Vitsu 606 system demonstrates Timewise design in furniture, the framework laptop shows how these principles can operate in contemporary computing. Launched in 2021, the framework laptop was designed explicitly around openness and upgradability. Unlike most consumer electronics, it is meant to be disassembled by the average user. Every major internal component is labeled with a QR code that links to repair guides, replacement parts, and recycling instructions. The laptop's expansion card system, which is shown in the upper right of this image here, allows users to physically swap ports out, USB-C, HDMI, display ports, among others. based on the specific technical needs of the user at that time. Magnetic bezels can be removed by hand. Captive screws stay in place during disassembly, reducing friction and anxiety around repair. These design decisions matter because they restore embodied access to technological interiors, a space typically understood not to be in the domain of the everyday user. They counter the assumptions that complexity requires opacity. Instead, the Framework laptop treats users as capable participants in the ongoing life cycle of their devices. Like the 6.0 system, the Framework laptop reframes technological aging. Upgrading no longer requires starting over. The device evolves through partial replacement rather than total disposal. It supports multiple lifetimes, not only of hardware, but of meaning. That said, these examples also reveal the limits of Timewise design as it currently exists. Access remains uneven. These designs are more expensive and require cultural capital to recognize their value. Timewise design then is not yet a mass solution. It is instead a framework of possibility. What these two examples have in common is modularity. Debrajita Panda and colleagues define modularity as a strategy for organizing the complex products through independent, standardized, and interoperable elements. They write that modularity principles promote interchangeability and flexibility, thus supporting circular benefits such as recyclability, maintainability, upgradability, and reusability. But within Timewise design helps reimagine the lifespan of an object through modularity. Rather than treating lifespan as a countdown to obsolescence, modularity through Timewise design through modularity enables what we might call a continuum of unfolding meaning. When a single component fails, the entire object does not become meaningless rubbish. Instead, individual elements can be repaired, replaced, or reconfigured independently, keeping the object in circulation materially and culturally. And this has several critical implications to it. First, modularity opens consumer relationship between interior and exterior, rather than embodied relationships to the surface. It counters that century of industrial design decisions that have progressively removed the user's body from meaningful engagement with inner workings. Smooth surfaces and sealed enclosures and hidden mechanisms have made technologies approachable and usable, but also untouchable in terms of their interiority. Second, modularity enables creative adaptability. It allows users to reshape objects according to changing cultural, technological, and spatial needs. In furniture, this is particularly powerful in a world marked by frequent moves, shifting domestic arrangements, and hybrid living working spaces. In computing, it allows devices to evolve alongside a rapidly changing technological standards. Third, modularity supports multiple lifetimes. Objects can move across phases of use, across users, and even across generations. This aligns modularity closely with the circular economy principles, where interchangeability and flexibility enable reuse, refurbishment, and recycling without total material loss. And then finally, and this is often overlooked, modularity can generate cultural capital through emotional durability, where systems are legible, honest, and aesthetically restrained. They accrue prestige because of their status as repairable objects. They signal care, discernment, and long-term thinking. Let's then return to that opening question. What would a smartphone designed to last 30 years look like? After walking through Vitsu's universal shelving system and the framework computer, the answer is no longer purely speculative. We can begin to sketch the contours here. It would likely have a body that tolerates age rather than disguises it. It would privilege access over seamlessness and hermetically sealed interfaces. Its battery would be replaceable, its processor swappable, its connectors standardized, its software would be backward compatible, open source, and interoperable instead of being a walled garden. But if we treat this as a design and engineering brief, we miss the point. The 30-year smartphone is not a product proposal. It's a thought experiment designed to surface the assumptions embedded in our current devices. When we ask what a 30-year phone would require, we're forced to confront the full material and technological scope of this transnational device: materials that age with dignity, architectures that permit intervention, business models that reward maintenance, infrastructures that allow migration, and users who care not as an inconvenience, but as participation and as cultural capital. The exercise reveals that durability is never purely technological. It's cultural, it's economic, and it's political all at once. That's why Timewise design is less a method for producing immortal objects than a lens for interrogating temporal assumptions. It asks designers to make time visible in the object, to account for wear, for repair, for handoff, for obsolescence. It asks what happens if we design for use lifetimes rather than launch cycles. The Vitsu system works because it anticipates changes at the core part of its design, and the framework computer succeeds because it distributes, not because it distributes change across replaceable parts, but both undo resistance by relocating novelty from total replacement to selective transformation. A 30-year smartphone then may never exist in literal form. The pace of the industry, the security protocols, computational shifts may make such a device impractical. But that's precisely why the question matters. It destabilizes the short now. If we designed a smartphone for 30 years, it would likely look less like a black box and more like an evolving system, one that accumulates marks, modules, meanings. Whether or not such a device reaches mass production, the thought experiment forces a deeper question. What would it mean to design technologies that we expect to evolve with us and alongside us? And that, I think, is the more durable question. Thank you.